Senator Bernie Sanders is hoping to serve in Biden's cabinet as labor secretary, and that's according to reporting from Politico. Now, Bernie Sanders has not confirmed or denied this report, which means it's probably true. But here's what we know so far based on a source who's close to Senator Sanders. I can confirm he's trying to figure out how to land that role or something like it. He personally does have interest in it. Again, Sanders declined to confirm or deny that he's putting his name forward for this position. Now, Sanders has been making his push for the top job at the Labor Department, in part by reaching out to allies on the transition team. One person familiar with the process said, when asked about Sanders's potential role, a spokesperson for Biden's transition team repeated the transition stock line that they are not making any personnel decisions pre-election. But as we know, in a story that we shared with you earlier this week, Biden is open to having Republicans serve in his cabinet. John Kasich is currently being vetted as a potential pick. We don't know exactly which role he would be chosen for. There are other Republicans that were named. We don't know if they're going to be chosen for Biden's cabinet for sure, but we do know that they're at least being vetted and considered. So I think it only makes sense that we have some progressive representation in Biden's cabinet as well. One person close to Sanders agreed that Sanders sees an opportunity to achieve long-held policy goals for the working class under Biden, adding he really does believe Biden wants to be a Roosevelt-like president. And this is where I want to bring you in, Nando. What do you think about that statement? Because I mean, we had a very frank discussion about strategy on last week's episode of Weekends for Jacobin. We were talking about the debate between Brianna Joy Gray and Noam Chomsky about whether or not it makes sense to vote for Biden. We both kind of fell in the position of you should vote for Biden. Why make things harder than it needs to be when you want to push for change in the country? But we also accepted that the likelihood of Biden moving to the left is unlikely. It's going to be incredibly difficult. And when you consider his message of unity, which is, trying to draw bipartisan support, which includes Republicans, I think it's a little naive to think he's going to move to positions that we really want him to move to. But do you think with Bernie in his cabinet serving as labor secretary, he would be able to have the influence necessary to move Biden to the left on incredibly important labor issues?
So Biden is not a committed ideologue, if that makes sense. Biden is very much a bellwether of kind of where the mainstream political environment is at any time. Like I'm reading a book now about the 1970s and Biden is a major character throughout it. And he was basically just kind of swept up in the currents of the time, which was basically the sort of hard right shift. And Biden went along right with it. But then, as soon as Obama got in, he was just he'd kind of made his peace with like a sort of version of Obamaism, this kind of enlightened neoliberalism. He's not a committed ideologue. And it is true that the ideological basis of the Democratic Party base has shifted dramatically to the left in recent years. It is also true that there is a more pernicious influence of the donor class on the Democratic Party. It is a conflict, and Biden is just kind of in the middle of it. So I think that it's important. It's one of the reasons why I think it is important for Bernie to try to get in there in some way. If he is in there, you might see a sort of very schizophrenic Biden administration. Like I don't think that on issues on like foreign policy, for example, like he won't do anything that's not just kind of your standard American empire building. But on issues around the economy, there might be some movement. It's just the scale of the economic crisis is so vast and deep that even some like upper middle class people and some upper class people are thinking like something pretty drastic has to happen, and for Bernie to get in there as labor secretary, I mean, the Department of Labor is one of these federal bureaucracies and departments that probably has more power lying around than people realize. You never hear about it because lately it's just filled with these kind of hacks that that don't really do anything. But Bernie would be the most famous labor secretary ever. I mean, there would be people watching like the day-to-day goings on at the Department of Labor, and Bernie is able to rally popular support for things himself. So you can imagine that department sort of having a lot of independent power. I mean, Bernie would have to be very careful about how he managed it, because if you went like, if he pissed off Biden too much, he'd probably get fired. Although it would be hard for Biden to fire someone like Bernie just because he is so popular, and there would be like demonstrations and things like that if that were to happen. I mean, people don't realize this. Like FDR's labor secretary was a woman named Frances Perkins. She was there basically the entire time FDR was in power. She was there from 1933 to 1945 as the Secretary of Labor, and she was absolutely key in sort of implementing the day-to-day of the New Deal. Running the Civilian Conservation Corps, implementing Social Security, unemployment insurance, all these things. Like if there would have been some like pro-business hack the way there is now and the way there has been for a long time at the Department of Labor, the New Deal would have just been much harder. Like it's not just legislation that passes and then stuff happens. Like there has to be sort of civil servants in positions of power to actually implement these things. So Bernie in there, I find it just to be like a very interesting prospect to see what he would do as Secretary of Labor.
So there are some potential downsides to this happening, and I want to get to that in just a second. But first, I want to read a member comment from Cousin Vinny, and thank you for writing in, Cousin Vinny. He writes in and says, "I think he, meaning Biden, does want to be like FDR. Whether he's able to give his policy stances is debatable, but I do believe he wants his legacy to be getting America back on track." There was a little bit of a hint to kind of buttress your point, because recently Biden did roll out his policy in regard to coronavirus and what he would do to tackle this very serious public health issue while also creating jobs, which of course are necessary as more and more Americans are getting laid off in the economic fallout due to the pandemic. And what he did was invoke FDR strategies from the New Deal in this plan. Now, of course, candidates put out all sorts of proposals as they're running for any position in government, and then whether or not they actually pursue it, that's like the big question after they get elected. And so I like the messaging. I don't know how serious he is about it, but I just thought it was interesting how he really wanted to emphasize this FDR-like approach toward this public health issue that we're dealing with right now. Nando, what were your thoughts on that? Like, were you buying it at all, or do you think it's just some posturing to appease progressive voters?
It's hard to know. I mean, we don't have any method of disciplining our politicians. We don't have any method of like kind of holding them to account. I mean, once they get in, they're in for 4 years, and so there's a huge incentive to basically lie to the voters. Is essentially the long and the short of it. But I think that I get the sense that the scale of the economic crisis is so big that there will be appetite to do something big. The question is what and what that is, and that's why I like the idea of Bernie getting in there, because you trust him. You trust him implicitly. You don't think that he's going to sell out. You don't think that he's going to do something horrible the way other people have. So, and Biden is, like I said, he's not a committed ideologue. Like he's not I don't know, like an Amy Klobuchar to me strikes me as like a committed ideologue, and Biden is just isn't that guy. He's more of a weather vane. He's more of a politician. So it really will depend on what pressure is applied to him.
Do you remember the name of the author that Michael Brooks interviewed? The author had written a book about Joe Biden and his entire career, and I don't want to mess up his name.
Marcetic.
Yes, that's who it is. I thought that was such an enlightening, from Jacobin. It's such an enlightening interview, and I've been meaning to read his book because it just really details the influences in Biden's political career, and what you just described is absolutely correct based on this author and this writer, and he had really carefully studied Biden's political career from beginning to where he is today. And I just thought it is interesting how malleable Biden can be. And I think that could be a good sign. It really can be a good sign. The question is, who's going to have more influence? Is it going to be the donor class and these never Trump Republicans, or can progressives organize effectively enough to push him in the other direction? So we'll see. And so now let's talk a little bit about what the potential downsides could be if Bernie Sanders decides to serve in Biden's cabinet, if he gets chosen to serve as labor secretary. So as we know, he's a senator out of Vermont. It's important to have Democratic senators right now, but Vermont Governor Phil Scott is a Republican. He'd be able to appoint a temporary successor to his Senate seat. Unlike governors in other states who get to appoint successors to carry out the rest of the term, Scott would be required under Vermont law to hold a special election within 6 months of the seat becoming vacant. But even allowing Scott the opportunity to fill Sanders' seat with a GOP lawmaker in the short term could potentially affect control of the Senate, depending on the results of November's election. So do you think that that's worth the risk, Nando?
Well, I don't know the internal workings of Vermont politics. I'm assuming Bernie does very well. And I'm assuming if Bernie is lobbying for this position, I think again, like I said, I trust Bernie. Maybe that's naive of me, but I trust Bernie's political instincts. I think he's a very good politician. And if he feels that there's an election, I believe, for Vermont governor right now, so it could be that a Democrat wins. Maybe Bernie knows something we don't there, but also I think Bernie's probably confident in his ability to sort of rally the voters of Vermont to basically vote for his successor in 6 months' time. Like, it is true that it would be a shame to have one less Democrat in the early phases of the Biden presidency, in the first few months or whatever. But I'm guessing. Like I said, I trust Bernie. So in terms of Vermont politics, which I'm not an expert in, if I'm sure he knows it better than I do. And if he is indeed lobbying for this position, I'm sure he's taken that into account. He's been in the Senate for a long time. He understands how it works. He understands how the institution works. I'm sure he's taken that factor into account. It's not like it's like, oh wait, I forgot. There's not going to be a Democratic senator. I'm sure he's taken that. He's weighed that downside.
One other thing though that I think is worth mentioning. So if he remains in the Senate, and I think we should see this as a good thing, because regardless of where Bernie ends up, he's going to have increased power, which I personally want, increased influence. And so if he remains in the Senate, he's poised to become the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. It's a pretty big deal, and the Senate Subcommittee on Health. And that's if Democrats take over the Senate following November's election. So I want to learn more, and I want specific details on what he can do as labor secretary. Based on what I know now, I think I personally prefer him in the Senate, especially when he has the opportunity to become the chairman of these incredibly important committees. But we should explore it more. We're going to interview Richard Wolff tomorrow on our show Weekends for Jacobin, and I want to ask him about this because I'm really curious to see what he has to say about it.
Nathan Robinson did a tweet storm where he talked about like the importance of having Bernie in the Senate because it allows him to remain independent and be like an independent critic of Biden, and that if he's in the administration, he wouldn't be able to like come out and say like, whatever Biden just did in Venezuela or whatever is like some awful thing. Like he would have to be much more careful about the way he handles that, and that's 100% true. I understand that. I think that the contra that I would say to that is that there has been a rise of independent left media. So the singular voice of Bernie is not as crucial as it may have been 5 years ago. And then the other thing is that for there to be any meaningful left power in this country in any conceivable way, even modest reforms, we need a revitalized labor movement. Like it's such a precondition for any social change in America and anywhere really. I mean, look at the Bolivian election. The New Deal happened because there was a large and organized working class and labor movement, and it's not surprised that the Department of Labor, which was started under Woodrow Wilson about 20 years before the New Deal, really helped the labor movement kind of establish itself and really gain a solid foothold in American life. The first labor secretaries were all union leaders. They all came out, like the first labor secretary ever was like a miner, who came up through the union movement. And we haven't had someone like that in the Department of Labor for a long time. And so Bernie in there, you could imagine him really, really pushing some very large unionization movement, whether it be like at somewhere like Amazon. Like, can you imagine what it'd be if Amazon got unionized? I mean, it would be a total game changer. Or, Walmart, the largest employer in America, like famously anti-union. Like if you have someone like Bernie at the Department of Labor, like actively working with workers at those companies to unionize, like it could be a huge source of power down the road. Like yes, Bernie coming out and talking about the awful thing Biden just did, that's important as well, but really you need a sort of solid base of power, and that does not happen without a large and organized working class. And someone in there like Bernie at the Department of Labor could be the seeds of a revitalized labor movement.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.